All right, so welcome to our afternoon panel here. You're the lucky few who made it into this panel. As you notice, we had to cut the line off. If you find that you're on the other side of that problem at some point, we are actually recording these. They'll have them on YouTube later on, so we'll have all the panels recorded. And if you missed a Star Tot, you can also pick up those on Monday afternoon after we're done with all the panels. We're going to give away all the extra Star Tots we got, and we'll go through and until we run out, and we'll have extras of each one of them. So I want to make sure you know that, so you don't have to be at all 20 panels to get every single Star Tot. You could miss a few and fill in your collection. So what I want to do is introduce our next speakers and just jump right into it. This is a very exciting panel. I'm super psyched to have these guests here, and it's going to be a topic on how we go from concept model to actually a finished collectible from the Kenner Star Wars toy line. And so we got Jim Swearingen, formerly of Kenner, who's going to be discussing and interviewing this with Chris Georgoulias, who will be the interviewer. Thank you, and please welcome them.
Thanks everyone for coming. Like I said, I think you guys are going to appreciate this content. There's a lot of stuff in here, I'm sure, that you've never seen before. And I think it's presented in a way that tells a great story, especially from the early concept development side. As I said, my name is Chris Georgoulias. I've been involved with the collecting track for 20 years now. I've been to every single one, presented at most of them. And happy to introduce Jim Swearingen here, my guest, former Kenner employee. And you guys know him from Plastic Galaxy and the toys that made us.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm happy to be here. And I know a few of you, but I have to tell you up front that I'm in awe of collectors because I am not one of you. But what little collection I do have is most of it came from collectors. So I appreciate that. So, and I'm happy to be here. It's great. I've been having fun all week so far. So.
Yeah. Over the years, we've been tapping Jim as a resource, and he's come more into the fold in the past few years, and now that you've seen him on the screen, so it's I guess I'm very happy and excited to have him here with us.
I'm curious,
today.
How many people have seen Netflix? Those
right.
of you that haven't should.
Yeah. And unplugged Brian Stillman's Plastic Galaxy, all about Star Wars stories.
Oh, yes.
Check that out.
That was my start in this.
Jim's a celebrity, definitely. All right, let's get started here. I will tab through these things. I'll let Jim introduce himself, see a little period photography here.
Yeah. I started when I was 27 working on Star Wars. I was fortunate enough to be the first person to read the script from Lucasfilm and pushed it from there to where it is now, I guess. That picture that you see is Jerry Springer. Before he was a TV celebrity, he was mayor of Cincinnati. And on May the 4th of 1978-ish, he was declaring it Star Wars Day in Cincinnati, and I was the one, along with that really frazzled Chewbacca, to present him with his 12 action figures. So it was a long time ago, and you can tell by the fashion it was. And that was the R2 we built for a toy fair, not a real one. So.
Yeah, a little Easter egg I'll see here. Over Jerry Springer's shoulder, you see that building? That is the Union Terminal, and that's what Kenner used as the basis for the Hall of Justice playset. Yeah. From the Superpowers line. Yeah, that's a real, it's turned into a museum complex now in Cincinnati. So what we're doing here, concept models. This is some of the earliest stages of 3D forms of the toys. And some of the things here that concept models are used for, you can see them on the screen, kit bashed. You know, they're just really to show a design idea, just to get something down. These are things that Jim and his team would whip up, and just to show people just an idea. Sometimes better than a sketch. Sometimes you have a 3D form. You know, use it for presentation and photography and catalog photography and marketing purposes. A lot of these photos you'll see here, things were pulled out of catalog photography because back in the day, it was harder to update the photos. So they would send photo packet out, especially to overseas. Well, those guys would never get updated photos. So you'd open up a catalog and you'd see these concept models in there because this was physically mailing negatives and photos back and forth. So in short lifespan. They didn't use these for very long. It was just a early stage to jump into, relay the ideas there. And we're going to be covering only the Star Wars line today. I could do a presentation for like 3 hours. We just didn't have the time to cover the entire line. Kenner did so much development work. It's a tribute to guys like Jim who did all this development. And we're lucky that these photos still exist. And some of these pieces still exist too, which is amazing. We'll start off here. The earliest rendition here, originally Kenner was going to create 9 figures. And you see all your heavyweights there, and these are hand-drawn concepts. This is 2D drawing. This is before and even a 3D model. And the photo below it, I've teamed up with that. That's from an in-house display, again, showing the 9 core characters. And real crude drawings there, but enough to get the point across.
Not that crude. Oh, sorry.
Okay, not that crude. I'm sorry. It's not a slight on anybody, but they're not for the design of the figure.
Yeah, those are the first. Those were originally a presentation board and then cut up to make a 3D display.
Yeah.
And the other photograph is the kit
We're not
bash.
in yet.
Oh, you're not doing that.
That's the next slide.
Sorry.
He can see the next slide.
I can
here.
see the next.
And you will see it.
It's the confidence
right
monitor.
now. So we've jumped in some of the 3D form. Now, a lot of you people have seen these concept models. This is from the original, the 9 that correspond there. This photo was dated May 10th, 77. So just only a couple of weeks before the movie came out. And Jim, you want to talk about your experience seeing the film?
Yeah, when we started all this work way before the movie came out. We read the script around January, February of 77, and all those drawings of the figures and stuff were based on black and white photographs. And these models were done based on that same photo information. But when I read the script, I immediately thought we need to do the X-Wing and TIE Fighter, because I thought that was the play value. And the way these ended up, and the reason that action figures are the way they are, the size that they were, is that I needed a scale that was practical from a price point. So I went out in search of the figures to do these on. And these are all sculpted at my desk with an X-Acto knife and body putty. So it's far cruder than the finished production stuff. But again, like Chris was saying, it was to get the concept across, sell it into management, and to sell it into 20th Century Fox and Lucasfilm. Because we were selling everybody the idea of doing a movie property for Star Wars. So, but these are basically body putty and a lot of X-Acto knife work, and then painted. So when you get real close to them, they're not very clean. But it got the idea across, and these all show you the very first lightsaber. Those are was
we'll
a
get into that. We get it closer next.
Okay.
We'll jump into
He's
that.
much more familiar with the slides. I can talk a lot about all the little details.
I got a flow going. I don't want to like.
So anyway, those are the real rough models.
Yeah.
And that display came much later.
Yeah. So we'll and you can see here from C-3PO wasn't even ready at this point. He's still the cardboard cutout. And as Jim said, he sourced figures. He needed something of this scale. Well, I know the popular story is that Bernie Loomis, who was president of Kenner at the time, liked to say that they developed 3 3/4 inch would be their scale, and they said, how big should the figures be? Well, that's because there was already figures that Jim found that fit in there that worked, because there was a whole world developed by Fisher-Price, the adventure people, and these guys started this action 3 3/4 inch figure concept in 1975, and this is the offerings then, and they had ships and 5-point of articulation action figures.
Perfect for kit bashing.
Perfect for kit bashing, and we'll start here with Ben Mountain Climber Kenobi. All right, so he's one of the 2 guys in this set. Now, and Fisher-Price is funny, as I was going through finding all the reference, these guys would just swap limbs and reshoot. So they did all this repaints, just like we're familiar with now. It really just to save cost there. But you can see Jim took this figure here and did a little painting and a little vinyl. And, the head's not changed. So it's a fantastic way that he was able to take this and turn it into a Ben Kenobi, with in relatively short time to be able to show somebody a 3D action figure that would be for the Star Wars line. And carrying forth here, Princess Susan Organa from the rescue team. Again, here's another one. That's hardly any changes there.
I didn't spend time putting buns on her, so.
She has a little belt. That's pretty cute there. But yeah, just repaint. You can see the sleeves are still, everything's there. Just repaint that figure. But they didn't only look internally. Jim was able to look internally. And it's funny, too, as I was putting this together, I was showing him things he hadn't thought about in 35 years, so he didn't even remember some of these things. So it was fun to kind of refresh his memory. But like I said, they looked internally at Kenner, and there were some things at Kenner here. And you can see Chewbacca here is based on the dual launch drag race set that Kenner developed for the $6 Million Man line. And you can see Bionic Bigfoot has been converted. Break them apart, re-glue it, but you can see the legs. You can tell it's the Bionic Bigfoot figure there from that set. And there was a Steve Austin set and a pair that they would race in this set. So really fun. Made the bandolier, wrapped thread around to make it look like the cartridges. I don't know where the gun came from. I didn't do that much digging into that part of it. But anyway, really fun to see that.
By next celebration, I'll know where it came from.
All right, made from various materials. You can see this is a good array here where C-3PO's hard paper. Jim mentioned the body putty. He means like Bondo that you'd see cars with the body. That's what they'd use. That's what he was using. That's what he means by body putty. And then that's a modified, another Fisher. All the Fisher-Price figures had that, like the bell-bottom pants, the bent leg. You can tell it's a Fisher-Price figure. And the last one is R2-D2 completely kit-bashed. And Jim says he had the model shop make this.
Yeah, they mocked it up.
Yeah, the model shop at Kenner in the basement. You give those guys some sketches and some direction, and they have the milling machines and equipment, and they're able to create things that I don't know how they came to the dome, but I don't know if you can tell that the decals are peeling off. This is all hand applied, everything. This is just a very rough made, handmade model, and
Prelim had the premier model shop in the company. We had a group of about 6 or 8 people that went through, and all they did was preliminary design development stuff. But we had every kind of equipment and could do almost anything. If they couldn't do it, they'd find somebody that could. So.
Yeah. Jim worked in prelim design, but these guys get a rough concept here, and then they would turn it over to the production design team who had to make it into a functional costed action figure. So Jim, he was just really working on the concept side here, like I said, in the prelim team in their own model shop. And now we'll jump into early lightsabers that Jim was alluding to here. See the first lightsaber was a monofilament line, like a fishing line, had a little crank in its back, and you could pull the lightsaber out, wind it back in.
Yeah, that was our first attempt. And this is where turnover. These two models actually show the turnover sequence because we couldn't get a filament that would stay straight when it came out of the hilt. So we turned it over because it was their problem. But the monofilament is naturally made. It has a spiral when it's made. So when we turned it over, I think that Ben Kenobi was probably actually modified by the model shop because I think that shows the first telescoping model, but they probably took our original model and modified it just to show the concept in the production as it was presented over and over again. So this kind of shows you how the process from prelim to production, and then obviously sculpture and stuff actually follows.
Yeah, it's hard. It was hard for me to say. Jim couldn't remember definitively. It looks like under his wrist there's a little tab that you'd pull it to show the retractable lightsaber, which eventually went to production. So where are we going from here? We started at 9, and then we jumped to 11. We've added, there's C-3PO underlined in blue. He went to 3D form. That's another modified Fisher-Price. It was a scuba diver. And then we've added 2 more. We got a Jawa and a Tusken Raider. So rounding out, filling out the line more, and from 9 to 11, we've jumped to 12. And at this point, we have the original 9 are in more or less their final action figure form, and the 3 underlined here, the Jawa, Tusken Raider, and the Death Squad Commander are still in concept form. And we could tell from the hands that the Tusken Raider is Fisher-Price Adventure people. We could tell from the hands of the body shape that the Death Squad Commander is as well. And if you guys remember from Toys That Made Us, Dave Okada took his brown sock and he made the cloak for that Jawa. So really interesting, and we'll be getting more into these last 3 here. There's an in-house display, again, showing those figures. I wanted to highlight here that the Death Squad Commander in the graphic is the figure that you guys know, the human with the helmet. But you saw the figure before, sort of like the black stormtrooper-looking guy. Well, those last 3 figures, this corresponded with how Mark Kenner released the figures. Those 3 figures were the last 3 of the 12, and they even had this is a store display showing that this is the last 3 new action figures. So this is late '79, and you can see a good close-up here. I've never seen a photo that really shows the Tusken Raider's face. They must have glued the arms in that position, because all the photography that's been around has shown that him holding the gaffy stick in front of his face. But nice close-up, closer view there of those 3. And again, interesting Death Squad Commander, right? So let's look into him a little bit more. So Jim's original Stormtrooper there with the Bondo puttied head, and you can see he's quite distinctly different from the production figure. But you can see the Death Squad Commander there, definitely a black Stormtrooper, right? Larger helmet. It's not the original helmet. It's not the production version of the Stormtrooper helmet, but you can see the texture of the armor in his torso is present, the plates on his arm, but still has the bell bottoms from the Fisher-Price. So he's a little mix up there. But then the last stage to show, okay, at this point, they did make a cardboard cutout of that Death Squad Commander, so they're leaning in the right place. So we have this black Stormtrooper guy, and shown in photography here in this commercial with an early TIE Fighter concept model. So we have a black Stormtrooper in a TIE Fighter. He was a TIE Fighter pilot. So Kenner originally was going to create a TIE Fighter pilot in their line to fly the ship that Jim thought that they should have had, X-Wing and TIE Fighter. So I thought that was pretty amazing revelation there that they would see that. So the next step here, better sketches look more like the final figures. You can see now that that sketch from that in-house display where the humanoid Death Squad Commander now is realized. So they're all in pretty much their final form there, and rounded out, and that's your final 12, your original 12 action figures with the Death Squad Commander on the end. But maybe in an alternate galaxy we would have gotten this lineup. So Kenner eventually did that. And Jim doesn't know why that would have changed. They actually did that Death Squad Commander after you.
Yeah, that was done in production. Because once we turned the concept over, doing action figures, I was out of the action figure business because they didn't need me to do that beautiful sculpture. Someone else could do that. So,
That's right. So let's see. That's the original 12, and then we jump to the next 8. This photo is from a German catalog. Like I mentioned before, the international photography usually is where we see some of these. Most of these figures you can see are in their final form. The blue Snaggletooth is actually a very dark blue, and I'll get into more of these later. But definitely you can see weird. We get Death Squad, the Death Star droid, and the Luke again is the Luke's X-wing is a a Fisher-Price figure. But Jim was very puzzled because at this point they should have been able to do that in-house as their own figure, so he didn't have an answer for why they used another Fisher-Price at this stage when they clearly had their own sculptures. A little closer look here. The Death Star droid here is a kit bash. So you have C-3PO, and then this praying mantis head from this AMT Gigantics. It was a diorama set. Put those two together, and then a little shot at the end of the final version of that figure. Like Jim was mentioning, the model shop probably made that power droid. That's all. That would have been probably made with styrene and in-house printed stickers. So similar, but completely different. A little straight pointed the antenna. And R5D4 was definitely an R2D2 figure, and the model shop would have come up with a way to make that cylindrical head, which eventually tapered in for production. And here's our Ben Kenobi model again. This is what they used for the Luke Skywalker figure. I don't know what the head was from. I could not find that out. Walrus Man's a fun one. Everybody knows this guy, orange and blue. That it's like, where did this come from? Well, from the film there, you can see his orange top and brown pants. And one of Jim's contemporaries, Steve Hodges, did this in-house sketch here of the proposal for the Walrus Man action figure was that orange top with brown pants. And the next shot here is a closer up view of that figure you saw earlier, orange and brown. I think one of the reason they took that out because the pants, the legs are 3 colors. You have orange, brown, and black. And to save money, every time they would be challenged with saving money on painting. So it's, but I don't know why they added green instead of black. But you can see they were really close, but they missed the boat on this guy. So he would have been, I think he would have gotten a lot more street cred if he looked like that third photo there. So, but Jim said he was out of action figures at that point, like in terms of the development, but then there was a new guy, and Jim got involved.
Yeah, this is where I came back into action figures because Boba Fett was going to be a top secret project. It came back into preliminary design so that we could, because we were in a key card area where people couldn't come and go. So those photographs were the turnarounds that I took when Dave Okada and I went out to see the first costume. And people pointed out, this never made it to screen. This is one way early. And people always, there's eyes painted on the helmet. So that's a really early one. And then I brought the photographs back and we took it to the next step.
That's right. So that's George Lucas there. Jim took this photo. And that's his boss, Dave Okada. That was the guy with the sock. And they're here up at Skywalker checking out the new costume for the new bad guy. And a lot of people know the early development side, the Kit Bash Boba Fett. This is the very first 3D representation. Probably the most, and we had Gus and Will and Matthias did a panel earlier on prototypes that thought this probably was the most coveted prototype should it ever turn up. This guy made that figure. Yeah. And it's So he had a little help inside. So you can see here, he took the C-3PO torso, the Death Squad commander legs, Stormtrooper arms, and that's the Raider Shogun Warrior from Mattel. He took that arm launcher and turned that into the backpack.
I'd charge $1 million for it. So if anybody. No, it was really another X-Acto knife project, carving a Stormtrooper down to Boba Fett.
Yeah, so here's a little went through some revisions, just like any toy does. The very first version there, he would have had that plastic cape, but for cost reasons, that took that out immediately. Jim mentioned the eyes on the helmet. They simplified the design. Even Lucasfilm did that too. There was eyes painted on the helmet. And you can see that third version there. Stripped it down a little more in terms of color. They didn't change the first 2 photos are the same figure. It's just the color. The way these were color corrected, they don't match. And then the fourth line up there, you can see where they changed the missile from the pointed missile. They used the back to that Mattel shaped missile. And that's the one you'd see on the card backs. And then contrasting that to the very end, the final version of the Boba Fett. You can see the very first versions where they had those lines painted on his boots. That translated to sculpted lines in his boots. So they did what they can to in the sculpted form to add features that you wouldn't have to add later and save money when you can mold them right off the bat. And then the famous launching, the launching mechanism there. Originally, like I said, from that Shogun Warrior, you just push the button and it launches out. Eventually, I'm not going to go through. I'm not doing the development of Boba Fett here. Ultimately, it would come to that little J-slot shape in its back where you pull it down and release the missile. The missile, it was a terrible design, really, from a toy standpoint. The missiles don't clip in like you'd expect. It sits on top of this little cylinder inside, and it sits on top of that spring. So when you launch it, as soon as you launch it, the missile just tumbles. So it wasn't cool like a Battlestar Galactica missile move. So anyway, but we didn't get to see that at that point because of Battlestar Galactica, they had a choking death, unfortunately, and right around Christmas time in 1979, that happened, and because all the toy companies are in the safety part of the consortium, and they work with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, that feature was pulled from the Boba Fett. But Kenner was not to stop there. That's the last 21 figures there, but then something else happened in 1978, a little thing called the Holiday Special. So, kit bashing again. This is all Chewbacca's family. You have Itchy, his father, Chewie, Mala, the wife, Lumpy, the son, and obviously the first three are just modified Chewbacca figures. When these first turned up in the mid-90s, I was highly skeptical that these were legit. Well, later on from Lucasfilm, that file photo turned up that was a Kenner file photo. So those were on display for internal proposal. Obviously, it went nowhere. These are terrible representation of Itchy. Molly was kind of, anyway, a little sketchy. But you can see Lumpy there. He's got what? He's got the little bent arm and a slightly bent leg. What does that mean? Fisher-Price to the rescue again. Here's little Johnny from the Wild Animal Safari. They tortured that poor figure to get it to look like this. So. Well, you got one of those. Yeah. Okay, you need the cage to complete your set. Now you got a better reason to get it because of the Star Wars tie-in. You never thought it'd be cool. Still not cool, but it's cooler. All right, let's see. We'll jump past. Still tied to action figures. This was an in-house display. I mean, you can see cardboard display. With the action figures would have been on there. Graphics on the front panel. I'm pretty sure that this, at least in somebody's head, it's like, hey, we could do something with this and turn that into the early bird because it's so similar to the early bird backdrop. And get more stand. That photo you saw, the first photo, it was a zoomed in of this version. So that was a mock-up of the action stand. You can see the little levers, which to me I think it looked like popsicle sticks because I don't think this was articulated. There's no spinning discs on this. And then the backdrop, they used that multi-part backdrop later on in the Empire Strikes Back with the display arena. And ultimately that turned into the first Star Wars mail-in premium, which was the action display stand. So really neat to see that at that 9-figure stage, they had this action figure display stand in their minds. A little more concepting here early. Everybody knows the blue snaggletooth was first available in the Cantina Adventure set. And here's that set. The set is exactly the same with 3 characters here. And Jim, I think, knows who drew these guys.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I know I did the Greedo and the Hammerhead. And I think that I may have drawn the other one. But again, we went back to the style that we were using before.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more. As this all happened after the movie, before all those other figures. So after the movie, we got more feedback from Lucas, and they took more pictures for us.
Yeah, because Lucas was Jim and them struggled. I mean, they took photos, as you guys have seen in the film versions and the shows that Jim's have been in. They had to shoot photographs of the movie screen because that's how they were getting their references from Lucasfilm. So it was very DIY almost there on the Kenner side. But at this point, there was no blue snaggletooth in that set. Interesting blue boots on Walrus Man, though. It was pretty slick there. And And then the Creature Cantina set, you can see the first version here. That's been on the back of the earlier Kenner cards on the 21 backs or 20 backs. And it's a completely different base. That'd be a vacuum form base, but it had all the elements there. It had the bar, the cardboard backdrop, the doors that swing open. Those doors are blue, but look closely here. There's our dark blue Snaggletooth and our orange Walrus Man. They made it to this photo session. And then the next photograph here is of the Cantina. And I like to plug rebelscum.com. I stole all these blue background photos. Dave Myatt shot these for their archives, and they're very handy to have these for comparison purposes. And Land of the Jawas went through the same thing there. Cardboard backdrop. You had your pod, plastic base with action levers, but all completely redone. You can see that pod is very plain Jane. But look closely. There's the other two more figures from that original photography shoot there, that early concept Power Droid and R5-D4. And jumping into the Droid Factory, all the elements there again, the idea of a crane, multiple parts that in a base where the parts fit, all completely handmade model here. This will be in white styrene material painted brown. You can see from the edges where it's scuffed a little bit. So really, really fun stuff to see. And that the guys were using like found parts in a set like this, and just to put the idea together, and they would use stuff like model kits and
lots of model kits, set, spaceships and airplanes. They all got sacrificed for these things.
All right, and here's one I don't think you've seen unless you've been online for a long time and you remember this back when they popped up on StarWars.com. It's the Death Star space station. Yeah. Which Jim helped make.
The one on the left is the model that we built in prelim, and that's all. The cannon on the top is the kit bash. That's a whole bunch of different parts. Probably Second World War cannons and some spaceship parts from NASA. So we constructed that way. The desk in the middle, that was all done with vacuum form parts by the model shop. Not exactly parts of that original trash compactor are from some Play-Doh stuff that we did, and I think part of it was too from a product that we had called Play Stone, but I know the crank is from an extruder. So, but we would use all kinds of things just to put these things together, and then it was again turned over to production design and where all the kinks were taken out of it, and the production models next to it. So, but It is just a process of putting it all, kit bashing and model shop work.
That's right, and you can eagle eyes if you can see that little the trash compactor monster sticking his head out in there. It's only 3 levels, but all the basics are there, the cardboard inserts and everything. But you can see, they turned it over for the production designers and those guys. They made it 4 levels. They integrated the trash compactor. So really, as cool as the concept model is, they really took it to the next step when they finally released the toy. So kudos, and that's a great playset. It's just so many features packed into that one thing. All these elements from the film that they captured in this one toy. It's probably one of the favorite playsets.
It was designed specifically when we designed it. It was designed as pie wedges so that you could continue the circle. So it was intentional that it was shaped like that. I've never actually seen anybody put that many sets together. But
I think it takes like cool. 16 or something to do that. So kids wouldn't have done it. But now that you can buy beater sets, and I've seen a couple of different guys that do it. But I think it's like 60. It's an insane amount. It's less of a wedge than you'd think. You'd think you'd put 4 together and it'd be a circle, but the idea was there to make a round Death Star. So really, really fun thing. And a little early version of the Patrol Dewback here. You can see where they, sculpted the legs into the saddle, so it looked like the stormtrooper were straddling it. Right?
Yeah, but that was a practical solution that we had to come up with. Because we had straight-legged figures, we had to find a way to put them on the Dewback. So the trap door was where that happened, and that was continued on to the Tauntaun.
Yeah.
But it was a way to have stiff-legged, non-articulated hips to put them on a Dewback or a Tauntaun.
Yeah, so Jim came up with the trapdoor idea, and this is a late '79. He had gone to visit the set Empire Strikes Back to see the Tauntaun, and he got the idea of doing that. So about the time this was being developed, they were still developing Empire Strikes Back. So that's why, and the Tauntaun had the same feature in there. So pretty cool. And the other thing in this, the Dewback's head here would have gone up and down versus side to side. So from a play value, the swinging the tail and making the head go side to side is a natural combination versus the up and down motion. So it's pretty neat, but it's amazing. This physical model has never surfaced. And then we jump into the early X-Wing fighter model that Jim alluded to.
Yeah, this is based on the snapshot that we got, which was a 3x4 snapshot of the X-Wing. So the proportions weren't real clear from the snapshots, but these were the X-Wing concept was developed in prelim, and the lights and sounds, putting an LED on the front, which was pretty high tech for 1977. And then everybody asks about the buttons. They're from Radio Shack. But again, this is getting the concept across. We didn't have to worry about how you'd integrate it. We just needed to present it to our management and 20th Century and Lucas. So we got the idea across, and then once it went to preliminary design, or went from preliminary to production, that's when all the refinements got done. And this was done after the movie. I mean, the prelim model came before the movie, but the production stuff started after the movie. So we, by then, were getting photography that we needed from Lucasfilm. So it made it much easier, because they weren't prepared up front to have the front, side, top, bottom, all the views that we needed. They just had snapshots off the set. So that's why our proportions changed. And also we were fighting price point. That's why this one's a little stubbier than the one they're making now. Is that this cost $15.99 retail. So we were fighting prices. The last one I bought was $57. So.
Cool. You guys can see there's two buttons in the back, one for the sound and one for the lights, but it has all the elements there. The X-Wings fold out. The R2 dome is in there, the canopy that moves. So except for the little stunted wings, it's pretty much all there. And this would have been made in their model shop, out of styrene board and other parts. And going along with that, the TIE Fighter you guys saw earlier. This is on the back, and that X-Wing before and the TIE Fighter were translated for the 12-back card back. If you ever look at those, kind of off, the TIE Fighter looks a little different. It's a photo of this model. Again, a styrene model, very plain here, no panel accents to give it some color. And he dressed it up, give it a little bit more industrial look. And certainly when you add the decals to the panels, it definitely improves it. And the octagon of the clear canopy there. I mean the windshield. Or no wind in space, but you know what I mean. So when they jump into the Landspeeder, you can look at this guy. He's pretty fancy. The paint job there looks a little bit more like Luke's Landspeeder. Would have cost reduced this more to produce the final toy, but really cool piece to see. And like for Jim's purposes, just to get the idea across, you just throw a remote control next to it and you say, hey, we're going to do a remote control version. It's the same one. So ultimately, this was the sonic Landspeeder, so that you click that remote and the sound would activate the steering of that. I think that was only released at JCPenney. A higher price point, one of the rarer Star Wars toys from that time period. And then bringing Darth Vader's TIE Fighter into the fold here. He gets his little shot. You can see the little white around the canopy. They just took a white TIE Fighter and painted it gray and made some new wings out of styrene. It's all flat sheet. There's no cross-hatching or anything on those. And this guy changed quite a bit here. It's the original model for the Sandcrawler. Obviously, those are tank treads. A lot of the wheels in there, things like that, were highly detailed. They were never going to go into the final model, but this gets the idea across. And you can see that the little antenna sticking off the back of that thing. So the form was mostly there. They changed it a little bit, but really interesting to see. And this is, again, this would have been a white styrene model that was painted painted brown. So very fun stuff. Early version of Millennium Falcon. And the guy who made this is still with Hasbro.
Yeah. Mark Boudreau is still designing Millennium Falcons. His first one was done in foam core. It was a beautiful foam core model. And then they went further, going on to styrene. But yeah, he's had his hands on, I think almost, maybe not all of them, but most of the Millennium Falcons that have been done over the last 40 years. Yeah. He's still doing it.
Still doing it. Started as an intern,
yeah,
working for these guys, and now he's the head honcho on the design side for Hasbro. You know, this guy's pretty wicked, isn't it? Imperial Troop Transport, the early concept of this, very angular design. It's got an X-wing engine pod on the top. The engine pod's actually where the battery went into a C-size battery would have fit in there. The top of the pod, the pod was split in half, and you could put the battery in there. And this is mentioned in, I think it's Plastic Galaxy. He talked to Tom Troy, the designer of this. He envisioned a sort of Imperial droid that went in, so you could see that droid in the front of that cargo hold. And he basically took an R2-D2 figure. He had to cut the feet in half. You can see the feet have been chopped down because it was too tall to fit in his model. That droid, that black droid R2 still exists. We've never seen evidence of the 3D form of that troop transporter existing, but that'd be another one that was all sheet styrene painted and expertly made by the model shop. That's a gorgeous piece.
And there's lots of model kit detail on it. Yeah, it's much cooler than what ended up in production. So Tom was in the prelim group, and that's what he turned over, and then it was probably cost reduced for some reason, make it shorter, more compact, or maybe Lucasfilm had their influence on it.
Yeah, I think this made its, this is back into the toy fold in the last few years as a toy. I think it's in Rebels, right? And then jumping in out of the action figure vehicles into the diecast line, you can see two early versions here of the X-Wing and, one each of the TIE Fighter and the X-Wing. I mean, that TIE Fighter, I should have taken a picture. It looks like the Colin Cantwell, sort of reminds me of that, of the original models that Lucasfilm helped develop for the movie side. But just interesting to see, the early versions and how they transform to the final version. And again, expanding that line, the rest of the diecast vehicles. If you look really closely at the Millennium Falcon, is again made of styrene. And I don't know what the scale of these are. When you take a photo like this, you can't tell exactly how big these pieces are. It's possible it was 1-to-1, but pretty neat to see that somebody sat and handmade that. Possibly Mark. We don't know for sure, but you can see the differences there, how it went from concept to final form. And then now we've gone through diecast. What's left? We got a little 12-inch action figure action here. We got early concept of Luke and Leia. And all the basics are there. All the hair, the styled hair, the belt, the outfit, and Luke's belt, the grappling hook, it's all there. I do not know what figures those are. Those are existing dolls. It looks like Marie Osmond. So Luke and Leia, we jump in, back to $6 Million Man, use the Bionic Bigfoot there to mock up a Chewbacca. So pretty cool there. And then sticking with more TV toys, we took the Hardy Boys, Parker Stevenson, gave him an outfit, shot some photos, and he's a really confident Han Solo right there. If Nancy Drew was definitely going to love him if he showed up in that outfit. So and you can see the basics again there: the metal, the vest, all the clothing, everything translated over. Because it was easier. They could have made their sewing department would have been able to whip up an outfit way faster than you could tool up a new head. And you had these pieces already in existence. So why stop at Han Solo? Throw a little bit of body putty in there, give him a disguise, and turn him into Ben Kenobi. So This robe still exists. It's like a burlap cloth with a belt, like a monk's tunic almost. This is from a French catalog, this photo, so it's pretty fun to see that, that they would go to that level. But you can see just to get some idea that you're going to have a Ben Kenobi figure, it would be there. So once you've been Han Solo, once you've been Ben Kenobi, as long as you don't have any aspirations to be a politician, you might pull this one off. Now, he never denied being in this outfit here, but you can see this first version of Lando. Same guy here. Yeah, so, but awesome to see, right? And then eventually they did create a really nice likeness of Billy D. Williams, but this Lando Calrissian 12-inch was never released by Kenner. There are a couple of prototypes of that around, but really fun to see that progression there. And that's what's the fun thing about these concept models is they would do things like this. And there's a lot of aha moments. If you're looking through some random photography, in the 90s when we get some of these catalogs, you'd see these things for the very first time, just like you're seeing, though. And I had that aha moments, and lots of collecting friends here had the same things as we're researching these over the years. And another guy here, we're working for 12-inch figures. Joe Johnson gave these to.
Yeah, these are the first. These are Joe Johnson's concepts for features for the for Boba Fett. So they gave us I think there were 12 altogether, but they're this 1978-ish. Lucasfilm was one of the first companies to have a color photocopier. So these are the ones that I got are photocopies of the original the original watercolors that he did. So, but we use these as references, things we could do with Boba Fett.
Yeah, showing all the features there, and Joe was the designer of Boba Fett. And for those of you who don't know, maybe the Boba Fett was envisioned initially as a super trooper, like an elite stormtrooper. So the very first versions of this was completely white. You guys have probably seen they've made action figure versions of that since then. But translating these drawings into figure form, we have that Boba Fett. You can see a lot of the similarities, shapes in the helmets as in the drawings. That's Gary Kurtz, and he's holding a remote. There's a wire going from that remote to the Boba Fett. This is an electronic Boba Fett. Little stunted missile in his backpack. And basically for photography, they just took the electronic version out, just shot it without that as like, okay, we're going to just have a regular action figure. And then you can see the final version. So the changes they made between their concept and their final version. Pretty interesting there. And then moving along to some of the other guys. Here's a concept originally to project your Princess Leia hologram. Jim and his team thought we could do a projector here.
We put a Give a Show projector in the chest of the for R2D2, and that was cost reduced out of the eventual remote control unit. But it had lights and a lot more features than they ever put in production.
Yeah. So and then they sort of tweaked it to be this version here, where they took the Give a Show out and then just made it just the standard remote control. Except there's something a little bit more special about that because he's not as small as you think he is. On the side there, that's on the left side. That's the production version of that radio controlled R2D2, which is about this tall. So that other model is like this big. The big model did turn up about 10 or 15 years ago, so that still exists. Interesting, beside it, a concept model of what would have been that scale. It looks like it mostly styrene. The legs are like styrene sheet. With the controller, with that red controller. One of those red controllers surfaced recently. It was all painted black, but you turned it up. You look on the inside, it was red, and it's pretty interesting that was still around, and that red came from this original molded design. So interesting how it went from that bigger with the Give a Show to the smaller cost-reduced form of this figure. Getting into the plush guys, Chewbacca is quite fun there. Very similar to their final version, especially R2. But you know, everything went through its concept stage. A little development of the lightsabers here. Inflatable lightsaber was the first version that Kenner released. You can see the very top version, the goofy orange blade, but it looks like Darth Vader. But the hilt, look at the hilt, it's got all that detail. It's like a lightsaber that you'd see sort of nowadays. And then they moved that down to sort of really cost reduce that to basically that flashlight on that big fat tube. And then they changed the tube a little bit more with a decal and sort of have a blend between the first one and the second one to get your final version. And this toy is funny. It came with a little patch kit, a little piece of squares of tape. So when you punctured your lightsaber, you just put the tape over the hole and bopped your brother over the head. Early version of the 3-position laser rifle. And the laser pistol here, Han's laser pistol. This turned up only a few years ago. This is a Mauser. This is made in Hong Kong. It's from some toy. We haven't identified what toy that is right now, but they made a scope in the model shop and the muzzle to fit onto that existing toy. And then you can see the bottom photos. That's what the final version looked like of that toy. And expanding the lines here into Play-Doh. This is a good shot of, just taking a drawing and drawing all of the elements to show the Play-Doh set, showing we'll have 3 cans of Play-Doh, we'll have an X-Wing, here's a knife, here's the 3 molds, and it'll have a play mat. So just relaying what the final intention was for that set. And this was in the catalog as well. And a real early version here of the electronic battle game. You can see all the electronics. This have been they call it breadboarding. You develop the electronics. You're not trying to package them at that point. You're trying to prove out how the gameplay works in a sort of styrene, probably a vac form styrene base. And the X-Wing Aces used to be one of the coveted pieces in the 90s to get from the vintage line. This was all mechanical. It was basically there. Kenner developed this aerial aces game, this World War II shooting game, and it had string like cables on the inside. As you moved the cannon around, the cables would move lights in the back. It was a very complicated mechanical toy. The boxes got all these stickers that says "Do not drop" because they had a lot of problems with keeping this thing going. But you could see all they did was shoot it in gray, and it still got the cartridge from the shells on top, so nobody wants these nowadays, unfortunately. But it's a pretty cool idea. It's a very big tabletop game, so pretty fun there. And then the early concept. This is mostly packaging. The movie viewer for Kenner had been around for quite a while. They'd done Snoopy and other things, and they just translated it right to Star Wars, and it was perfect for Star Wars. It's such a visual medium. You can see it's mocked up the boxes. It's got the original Star Wars logo with the pointy W. And these guys you see, Star Tots. I don't know how many of you guys have known. We've been doing Star Tots since Celebration 6 was the first one. This is the 5th series of Star Tots we've done. We got Star Tots idea from Kenner. They developed four actual figures, but they had created 8. This was based off of their Tree Tot toy line, a preschool line. It was very rudimentary. The figures were 1 3/4 inches tall. Our Star Tots are 1 3/4 inches tall. We started our original set with these 8, and we made 8 more. Most of those, pretty much all those were designed by Jeff Carell. Matthias Rendahl did a number of those as well too, and now Jason Peltz doing the artwork. So we took this idea that Kenner had and really ran with it for us, and it's been really fun, and it seems like a lot of people like these, and this is where it came from. It was this concept. It never went anywhere with Kenner, but I think we've done some real justice here, and we brought it forth, and that rounds us out here. And I don't think we're quite, well, we have some time for questions if you guys want to answer some questions. We have 7 minutes, or if you want, or if you just guys want to head out. I'm willing to. We got one in the back.
There's one over here too.
Is there anything you designed that they never produced that you wish they would have?
Is anything that Kenner designed or that Jim designed that he wishes Kenner did produce?
Yeah, I get that asked a lot. We did so many products that idea things that never got done. We did a Death Star game that I thought could have been kind of cool. It was a game with a Death Star that spun around and you have X-wings on springs that you could fire at the target and then it would blow up. That's about the only one. But we did an awful lot of stuff that was just pure concept and never got made. And we're talking about 77. We didn't have any electronics, so everything was mechanical.
If you had to pick a favorite item that you designed, which one would be your favorite from concept to production? Which one stayed truest and that you love?
The X-Wing. The X-Wing and TIE Fighter. From the moment I read the script, that's what I wanted to play with. You know, I was 27, but when you're a toy designer, you think, I take 20 years away and say, what would my 7-year-old self want to do? And as soon as I read they were doing dog fights and they're chasing each other, it was like, that's what I was going to do. So.
Thanks, guys. We're going to take questions in the social area too.